So let's begin. So this is the second talk of the seminar, and I would like to present Brian Moelk. He has a long experience as a professional software engineer. He has worked for funded startups, public companies, international nonprofits, and private small businesses. He has built some special software for B2B and B2C class products. And he also has worked as an in IT departments and as a government. He has built software in different domains, like international treaty compliance, professional training, natural language processing, medical devices, and biotechnology. He earned his BS and master's in New York University. Yes. Okay, please welcome Brian Moelk.
Thank you, Miguel. Well, applause for at the end. Might not deserve it. Anyway, I'm here to talk about creating a sustainable career. Yeah, let's go. All right. Technical difficulty, of course. Anyway, this is who I am. As Miguel mentioned, I'm a software engineer, been a manager, an architect, a CTO. I've been working in tech for nearly 30 years, working in a wide variety of organizations within many different domains. Computer science degree at SUNY Sternberg in 1995. So I've been around a long time. And I'm a San Diego resident. Okay, so in this talk, it's about careers, but I also want to make a distinction between a job and a career because we're going to talk about jobs too. And the job is basically a one step, along the path of a career. It's one building block, where you generate income, you gain some experience, et cetera. And a career is basically your lifetime, trajectory of your professional life. Okay, so we talk about jobs in the context of a career. So before I get into this, what is a terrible job? For those of you who have worked out in the world, and for those of you looking to work, like what is your idea of a terrible job? Let me hear you. What kind of job do you want? Like, would you hate to work at? Retail. Okay. Well, dealing with customers, perhaps. You always want to deal with customers at some level. What aspects, make it a terrible? Just shout them out.
Terrible manager.
Terrible manager. Say that. Okay. About sorry, no work-life balance. Okay.
Unhelpful coworkers.
Unhelpful coworkers. Okay, right. So these are all on my list. This would be smoother. Maybe it's just connecting or something. Okay. Bad boss, bad colleagues, not leveraging or growing your talent or skills. Doing work that does not matter, like not meaningful work. Let's just do this. Okay. I'll just. Okay. Sorry. Work is not enjoyable. You're overworked, underpaid, and underappreciated. Right? All those things are terrible. You don't want to be in that situation. Okay, so what is the primary value engineers provide, like when you're on the job? What do you guys think? Any ideas?
Solving problems.
Solving problems, that's great. Okay.
At minimum cost.
At minimum cost, right. Okay, so here's like a tweet. I threw in a bunch of tweets. New grad, this is how he thought he was going to be spending his time, like all the time coding and like building technical solutions. And the reality is that the day-to-day activities that you spend your time on are much more varied, particularly about communicating updates, interviews, mentoring, other things like that. So interacting with humans. So my assertion is that a software engineer, and I know a lot of you are data scientists and data engineers, so I'll get to that, but as a software engineer, the primary value that I offer is applying technology to solve business and customer problems. So you nailed it. And it's really about the application of technology, not the specific technology that you apply. Okay, that's an important distinction. And so my interpretation or my extension, if I'm a data engineer and I ran this by a data engineer friend of mine, the data engineer's version of this is maybe applying technology to inform business and customer decisions. Okay. And then he also said, disseminate organizational truth. Okay, so remember that. It's important. Okay, so what is a sustainable career? What do we mean by sustainable? Green jobs? It's not what I'm talking about here. So what I'm talking about is the ability to earn a living. Career, you have to earn a living, obviously. Your work creates value for society. Your skills grow and evolve and adapt. You don't want to be stagnant, like over the course of your career, like however long that may be, decades. You're personally fulfilled, and it improves the quality of your life. Okay, so it's super important to have a career that does all of these things. Okay, and that's sustainable. Okay, how do you create a sustainable career? I've broken this down into like kind of 3 aspects that we're going to talk about today. One is, how do you navigate a changing technical landscape? How do you cultivate authentic relationships? And how do you avoid burnout and stay motivated? And I'll talk about each one of these things in some detail. And these I think are the challenges, the main components of creating a sustainable career. Okay, so the first, navigating a changing technical landscape. Here's some of the technical changes that I've witnessed personally of the internet. Back when I was starting to code and stuff like that, the internet wasn't a thing, or it was just a DARPA project. Obviously that's revolutionary, changed the nature of the work. Mobile phones, another one, iPhone, cloud computing, like all of these things, ubiquitousness of networks, whether they're local or mobile and cellular, all these things changed in dramatic ways, technology. So this is just like a snapshot at the beginning of time, like BC. You can see kind of like how it's slow to evolve, and now we're like exploding. So the whole point of this is I just want to show like the rate of change has accelerated, and I suspect that it will continue to accelerate. Okay, so we all know technology is changing, and one of the fears of getting into this field is like, how do you stay relevant? My father, to be honest, like when he heard that I was becoming a computer programmer or engineer, he was worried that I would not be able to sustain a career, like I'd be left behind after college. So to give you a little, so it's a fear that we all might have. Okay, so in order to discuss this, I'm going to frame this discussion in the context of the Gartner hype cycle. So Gartner is like a consulting firm or whatever, and they do analysis and whatnot. And basically they say that they produce this hype cycle, and they say, technology kind of falls within this hype cycle over time and expectations. And so when a technology comes out, there's a trigger for expectations or hype, right? And then it can reach the peak, and then eventually what happens is it doesn't fulfill all the hype, but at some point there's a slope of enlightenment, and then the plateau of productivity where you actually get some value out of that technology. So what does this look like, kind of using some specific examples? This is August 2024. This is where Gartner is like placing various technologies. You can start to see like this one. Generative AI is on this, pretty close to the peak here. There's a bunch of other stuff, WebAssembly, more AI, machine learning, et cetera, et cetera. So you can see as time goes by, there's a lot of hype, particularly in the AI space. Okay, so, and this is mimicked in S&P 500 earnings calls recently. You can see how this has spiked recently. And so the hype curve corresponds to what people are talking about, what people are investing in, what people are adopting, right? At least in the concept of AI. So there's some traps with the hype cycle. You can adopt too early, right? Unless you're the company like you're providing the tools, right? And then like you're good, like if you're down here. You can give up too soon, right? So in other words, like when you're in the trough of this disillusionment, you're adopting a technology and it doesn't actually work out for you. Adopting too late and hanging on too long. So these are these are Gartner's perspectives on a corporation adopting technology, right? And I think but I do think it's useful for an individual to understand the hype cycle, because you're going to be dedicating a certain amount of expertise and time to specific technology. So it's important to be wise about what you adopt yourself personally for your career. Okay, so this is a tweet, and a lot of people talk about AI replacing software. I went through the tail end of this, most of these GUIs. I don't know about UML, but whatever it is, let's say like Fortio, like there's been this pattern, right? Everybody wants to replace programmers. Everybody wants to replace coders. And that's why when we talk about what the primary value of an engineer is, a data engineer, it's not the code, it's not the actual technology, it's about the application of that to a particular problem or to provide some insight. Okay, so that's an important distinction. And what I would say is kind of agree with this. They have to accurately describe what they want. So we talk about prompt engineering or whatever it is, but I think the bottom line is I think we're safe, right? Because there's always going to be a need for people like engineers who can translate like business wants and desires and kind of craft solutions using technology, whatever that current state of technology may be. So it's a way of thinking, it's a way of life, more than the static set of skills. Okay, lesson one. So these are some lessons for 20 years of hype cycle from Blogger, whatever that I found. I'm just going to cherry pick like with some sampling bias here. Specifically talk, but so here's lesson one. We're terrible at making predictions. Okay, so out of the 200 or so technologies that have been on the Gartner hype cycle, most of there's only a handful that finish the hype cycle. Okay, and what that means is that they actually go through all of the phases of the hype cycle and actually become productive and useful to the hype cycle, right? So here's a snapshot of data science in 2016. You see like Hadoop base, this guy dropped off, this is like an obsolete thing. Natural language question and answering started to peak, and then it's coming down. And this is a little bit personal to me because I worked at a startup around the time of like actually year 2000, so 16 years before this, doing natural language question and answering. We worked with linguists to use WordNet to build up a lexicon of terms and try to build like an understanding engine. And so like that was kind of like the precursor, if you will, to like ChatGPT, at least in some sense, in terms of how you interface with it, like how the interface was designed. We wanted to push the language user interface rather than the GUI user interface. But anyway, so I'll talk a little bit about that later on. But the point of that, all of it, lesson 3. Lots of technologies just die. Okay, so that's the other thing. So out of the 200 that have been featured, only a handful, go through the whole process and become useful, but a lot of them just die. Okay, so you want to avoid kind of going too deep on technologies that will just die. Okay, that would be a bad thing, right? You start to learn something and technology just dies. Okay, so cycles of evolution. This is kind of an abstract philosophical point, but it's kind of like my perception of it. So what is this? This is an image of our solar system revolving around the sun and our solar system traveling through space and time. Okay, so what does that have to do with technology? So I've been around long enough that I've seen patterns of this, right? When we talk about natural language processing, I've seen this come up before, and I've seen this kind of fade away. Now, that doesn't mean that AI is not going to be successful or whatever. I'm not saying that, and it does evolve and change over time. So what happens is that you start to see patterns and cycles in technology, and that's like the planets rotating around the sun. But it does evolve over time as it travels through space. So it becomes different. Okay, so why is this important? Like, why does this make sense? Or what is the point of this? So take, for instance, like mainframes or where you store data, like data state. Like, where do you store data? Do you store it on the server? Do you store it on the client? What do you do? What do you do? Back in the day, when you had mainframes or large mini computers, most of the time you stored state on the server. You didn't have powerful clients to store state. This may not make, and then anyway, this may not make sense to you because you don't have to do your work to the mainframe or everything. And then PCs came out, and then everybody stored stuff locally and doing a lot of work locally because you had more powerful computers. And then what happened is networks got better, and so you started to transition into these client server architectures with GUIs and stuff like that. And then you had the network computer where Sun was like, no, we don't, you don't need PCs, you just need a nice browser interface because you can get GUIs there, and you put all your logic on the servers. And now, you have mobile phones, you have apps and APIs and things like that. So you see how these things kind of, the pendulum swings back and forth, the planets rotate around the sun, and yet at the same time they evolve over time. Okay, so that's the basis of this. Okay, so some technologies that have survived and died. On the left, technologies that survived, at least in my opinion. On the right, technologies that have died, or at least should die, in my opinion. So I put Web3 on there. Anyway, any of you have the pleasure of working with EJB, Enterprise Java Beans? You're lucky. Don't do it. Okay, so technology does die despite a lot of hype. So I want to call out one of these technologies in particular, Delphi, because it's relevant to me. So I spent the early part of my career working professionally in Delphi. That was back in the day of client servers where Windows GUIs were a thing, like that's what you did in order to be employed. It has its roots in Turbo Pascal. So I coded in Turbo Pascal in high school. And the creator of Turbo Pascal and Delphi, the chief architect, Anders Talsberg, went on to be acquired by Microsoft and create .NET and all these other things. So anyway, there's a lineage there. But at the time, I was working in Delphi, and client server architecture were a thing, and so I could make a good living. And then the internet happened. Okay, the internet started to take off, and they're like, "Oh, we got to build what?" Well, no one was building, Windows GUIs anymore. Okay, so this is where understanding the hype cycle and understanding trends and things like that really comes into play. So I was stuck with a bunch of these skills. I'm like, well, how do you navigate this career, right? How do you transition as revolutionary technology hits, right? Not all technology is revolutionary. So the way that I was able to do it was I found a company that had a bunch of code in Delphi that was making the same transition to the web, because all the companies were adopting it. And I was able to leverage my Delphi skills to transition forward. Okay, so that's one pattern of how you transition, like, because these things will happen. The other pattern is obviously you go back to school, you retool, you learn on the job. There's some other things that you can do, right, to transition. But again, remember the ultimate value that you provide. It's not about a specific technology. It's about the ability to apply technical solutions to business problems. So the lessons that you learn, even within specific technologies that go out of date or get, they become obsolete, are still relevant. And we'll talk about how in the next section. Okay, so what does it mean for you? You got to understand the hype cycle and how technology shifts and changes. Don't believe the hype all the time. Be mindful when you're selecting technology to adopt. Adopt popular and good. Paul Graham has this old essay. I can't remember what it's called, like Being Popular or whatever. And basically his assertion is that anything that's good is also relatively popular on some level. At least you have a core group of technologists that are really passionate about it. And so it will evolve over time. It'll be used and evolve over time. So look for something that's both popular and good. And then the important thing here is not necessarily the best. And what I mean by that is everybody wants to look at the best, and everybody spends a lot of time arguing about what the best solution is. The reality is in tech, oftentimes specific technologies are good enough, and that's kind of what you should adopt. I hate to break it to you. I mean, I'm not saying don't develop an aesthetic, don't have preferences, don't have biases. I certainly do. I really don't like Java, for example. But that doesn't mean that I'm going to break down if I have to write code in Ruby or Python or whatever. Anyway, No window abandon technology, like I said, like sometimes you got to jump ship. If you're gonna have a sustainable career. And then work within domains that interest you. And I think this is also super important because you want to do work on things that you care about, okay? Because that will sustain you. And also that domain experience will also help you transition forward as technology changes as well. Like any kind of domain expertise that you build is transferable. Okay, explore and learn. Then finally, explore and learn. Don't be afraid to explore. Always, dedicate yourself to learning. And so that's why education, what you guys are doing here, is so important. And you need to continue that going forward. Okay, so the one characteristic I believe that is essential for a long-term career and a sustainable career is to be curious, right? We all, by far, the most successful engineers I've met are curious people. They like to experiment, they like to poke and prod, they like to break things, they like to test limits. And so how do you embrace curiosity? Ask a lot of questions, listen to someone else about their passions, learn about important problems in the world, be persistent in finding a solution, and be unattached to any particular solution. Okay, so that means like being willing to step back, approach the problem in a different way, perhaps, that will yield a better result. Joyfully embrace the wonder of the universe. And then again, explore something that interests you, not necessarily technology related. And again, the reason why is because your primary value is to apply technology to things, business problems and customer problems. Sometimes those things are technology, sometimes those things aren't. But anyway, okay, so when I was putting together this talk, I was thinking about learning and the kind of the curve of learning, and Dunning-Kruger is the classic model for how you learn things over time, and how as you gain competence, your relative confidence in them. So, we all a lot of times Dunning-Kruger's mentioned in relation to the peak of Mount Stupid as like kind of an insult, like anyway, that you learn a little bit and then you become super confident, right? So you see this often in younger people. I was certainly arrogant, and then there's the valley of despair. Basically, you learn enough to know that you don't know anything, and then typically this fall is like kind of like, oh, I know how to do like a delete from table, SQL statement, and I actually do it, and or remove RF like from root. You start to make huge, big mistakes. You crash production or whatever it is, then you have this valley of despair. And you're like, I have no, confidence, but I have, I know enough to be dangerous, so to speak, right? And then over time, you gain competence, and then again, you have the slope of enlightenment plateau sustainability. This looks exactly like the Gartner hype cycle, right? This is the Gartner hype cycle. This is individual, personal, right, growth. Gartner hype cycle is macro industry investment business growth. So business is made of humans, and they're just as fallible as humans, and you can see the exact pattern in how hype cycles work. Okay, so what is it all about? So to me, navigating a rapidly changing landscape is a journey of learning and growth. So there's certain strategies you can use, about like how you want to focus your career. You can be a generalist, right? And you can be a specialist. Here's like a little graphic that kind of embraces both, and they're both useful and both valuable. Then there's like this notion of a T-shaped engineer, which is like you have a broad knowledge, but you have a deep T axis. And a lot of companies are looking for T engineers in their specialty because they want to have full stack developers and DevOps and all those. So they combine a lot of aspects, so you need a broad base. All these other things are whatever. They're just whatever. I would say, like my personal experience is, I kind of am a T, but I go deep when I'm faced with the specific problems to solve. But your journey may take you in different places. there's something to think about. These are strategies. And what I would say is the important thing is to think strategically about opportunities in the moment. So there are going to be certain projects, certain opportunities you have when you're employed that are going to be really good to like learn a new skill, to work in an area of business that you're interested in, to work with someone who can like really teach you a whole lot, right? Like maybe a great mentor, whatever. So think strategically about taking those opportunities when they arise. You want to focus on high impact activities and maximize your leverage. So things that may not necessarily be that hard or things that may not take a lot of time, but they are most impactful to the organization. Okay, so this is again, making sure you've got a good strategy. And so once you have a good strategy, execution is everything. So all the technical competence that you're building in school, all of like your learnings, you have to be technically excellent. You have to work hard. You have to bring. Okay, so that's the baseline, and that's what you guys learn here, and that's really what matters. But you do have to have a good strategy. If you don't have a good strategy, then execution is not going to matter. Okay, I always encourage you to start to see the forest for the trees, which means understand the context, understand the global picture, like what you're working on and why you're working on it, like from an organization perspective, or market perspective, or a human perspective. Because when you're in the heat of the moment making decisions about implementation, consciously or subconsciously, that understanding will guide you. You'll know what to optimize, what not to optimize, or what doesn't matter in terms of your implementation. Like how much time you should spend making like this beautiful architecture in this one area of code, or hey, I just got to code this to make this work, right? So understanding the forest will help you build the right trees. Okay, and then the other piece of advice perhaps is learn skills that are durable, things that have been around for decades and are likely to going to be around for another decade. There's another tweet. I agree with this. Must have skills. These things have persisted for a long, long time. Bash, like Linux command line stuff. SQL, Git. You'll apply these across your career for decades. What other technologies do you think fall into this category? First amount.
These days, containers and Kubernetes probably.
Okay, I agree with you about containerization. I agree with you probably about Docker. I'm not sure if I agree with Kubernetes. It may seem that way, but I think there's a complexity barrier that they may need to address because it's hard to run a Kubernetes clusters and sometimes it's overkill for people. So you're going to start to see opportunities for, at least my take on it. Kubernetes is great. You can learn it. It'll be around for a while, but I don't know if it's going to be as durable. Right? So that's my hot take. I could be wrong. I'm often wrong. We're terrible at predicting things. But yes, good answer. Anything else?
Give another answer.
Oh, sorry.
I can give another one if you want.
Throw it out.
Maybe learning AWS or GCP or Azure, one of them.
Those are older ones. Yeah. Okay, yeah. I agree. Cloud computing dynamics, but I would argue that those are kind of like networking and like your core stuff. But yes, cloud computing, APIs, stuff like that. I would throw Python in this mix. Hot take. But anyway, so that's the idea to learn things that you think are going to have a long tail. They're going to be around for a while. You can always use those skills to pivot and transfer. Okay. So this is a quote from David Snowden, the creator of the Connecting framework. I love the Connecting framework. I could do a whole Connecting framework. It was a big rabbit hole. My wife can attest to it. Anyway, starting your journey with a sense of direction, not destination, and learn along the way. And I think that that's right. I think that that's kind of the idea, and I think that's what I'm trying to say here with the navigating the. Okay, let's move on. Next one, cultivate authentic relationships. What determines your success at work? My assertion, not technology, not process, not data, not process, not exclusively. Okay, obviously you need good technology, you need relatively high quality data, and you need reasonable processes. But the most important factor in my experience that will determine success at work and your projects are humans. Okay, like it or not, relationships matter. This tweet to me makes a lot of sense. Every company is a mess in one way or the other. You know, you may think that companies are great and like they kick butt or whatever, but they're usually a mess internally. And so the most important thing is decide on who you enjoy working with, and you can trust and you can respect. Those are super important. Who's gonna have your back when you're facing deadlines and it's like you gotta sleep and all of those. Okay, centering humans. So the whole point is centering humanity, humans. Okay, so in order to do that, understanding your role is like something that I just picked out from the interwebs because I knew I was talking to some data scientists. You can kind of see this. This is the important thing. How you tell your story, how you present your data is super important. I don't know if you guys have any classes at SDSU about that, but this is really critical in order to have impact in an organization. How many people have worked with product management? A little bit? Okay. Let me explain these rules. Okay. Typically, design and tech are your engineering, your UX, UI designers, they design your interface. You have engineering staff, software developers, data scientists kind of fall within that bucket. You have users and customers. You have your business managers, your executive suite, your running the business, et cetera. And then you have these folks that are product managers. They kind of sit in the middle and they balance all of the stakeholders' kind of interests. So understanding where you are in an organization, how that organization functions, determines a lot of your ability to succeed. So product management typically defines the what of a product, like what features go into a product, what it actually does, what problems it solves for user customers, what the business can sell. That's all I got. Design and tech and engineering define the how. Like they're responsible for how the product is built, how the product is implemented, how the product gets delivered. Okay. Okay, so there are different ways of working in different organizations. These are kind of like little samples of different organizations. I'll just kind of go through them. This, I think, is the most kind of common idea of how technology departments work. Like you have a product and product management, you have the design, UI, UX folks, and you have engineering folks, and they all collaborate together, and they equally, they're equally balanced. Everybody has an input, you collaborate together, and you build a product, right? That's great. This is similar, but there's a lot more overlap. You typically find this in larger organizations, you find this in smaller organizations. None of this is right or wrong. Like none of these things are right or wrong. There's different ways of working. Here you have a product-driven organization where design and engineering don't necessarily collaborate and the product kind of stands between them. Here you have design as a service. Maybe you're big enough and you don't have a lot of designers. And so you kind of like, piecemeal them out. Like you bring them in towards the end of a project, like fix up your UI that the engineers designed, which is usually terrible. So you bolt on like a nice looking, design or whatever. Here you have product that basically, it's sort of collaborative, but the product is really the one driving, the bus, like creating the tickets, pushing the priorities, things like that. This could also go the other way around, where you have engineering driving the bus, where you over-architect products. You spend too much time building the most beautiful architecture in the world, and then you can't sell it. Like it doesn't actually solve a problem that people care about. Here you have, management meddling in, transforming the business, whatever. So these are all different ways of working. These are kind of like caricatures, but they kind of give you an idea that different organizations work differently. And you'll end up liking or disliking certain ways of working. As you transition from job to job, typically these are forged culturally, like these are kind of a part of the culture of the company. And for smaller companies, they are forged from their founders. Like the founders typically forge the culture of the company. Okay, so why do I even talk about this? Because understanding your role and understanding that A lot of how change happens in a complex reality is difficult. And so the better off, the more you understand how people work and what the roles are and what the culture of the organization is, the more able you are to make good decisions and advocate for yourself to drive change and make more of an impact. Okay, so empathy is a superpower. Is your superpower? You need to understand people's incentives. So product managers are incentivized by, whether or not they ship a product that is on time, on budget, and can increase sales. So their incentives are structured, their, evaluations, their performance evaluations are designed that way. They are not incentivized for engineering quality. Okay. Ironically, engineers aren't always incentivized for engineering quality either. They are actually incentivized to get stuff done or to increase velocity within a team. Understanding motivation. Motivation is super important. Users typically don't care what technology is used in an application. You all use apps and services on the web and everything in your phones. You don't care what it's written in. You don't care what the backend is. Users are the same. They just want to get their job done. You want to, have a simple life. So if you do something that makes their life more complicated, even though it's better for you or it's what you're, supposed to do, you can understand how they might be upset about that. So again, understanding all of these things, understanding motivation, understanding incentives is important, understanding intent. So sometimes management wants to broaden scope of what they're working on, like expand markets, expand their business to make more revenue. Sometimes they want to narrow it to refocus because they believe, hey, we can actually take more from a niche, like get the niche first and then like build out from there. Sometimes so where they may cut a project that you're working on, they may defund it, they may lay you off. These things happen. So understanding intent helps you guide and be more effective within an organization. Helps you manage your career more strategically if you understand these things. But the only way you get that is by empathizing with other humans and cultivating relationships with them. So a good place to start is in your team. Typically, you're not going to be hired alone. You may be hired alone if you're in a small company, but you still have a team, which is the whole company. 10x productivity, the myth of the 10x productive engineer. It's not about you, it's about helping your teammates, and that's how you get 10x productivity as an engineer, in my opinion. Karma is real. Karma comes back. And then you will learn the most from the people around you. So the people that are doing this kind of similar jobs as you do, may have been there for like a month or two, longer than you. They may have really good insights about what is required to do a job, and you can learn things from them. And they will teach you if they're good teammates, because they're not, again, good colleagues, not bad colleagues. And then be willing to place team goals over your personal goals sometimes. Okay, so sometimes you got to be willing to take one for the team and invest in the karma. That will help the team as a whole. And it signals to the rest of your team that you've got their back. Okay, so being a good leader is important. And my assertion is anybody can be a good leader because authority is structural, but leadership is earned. So Simon Sinek talks a lot about this. If you've seen some of his YouTubes or videos, basically authority is the org chart structure, right? Like you have a boss, they can tell you what to do, whatever. Generally, you should listen to them. But that's not necessarily leadership, in my opinion. Leadership is taking care of people around you. And so you can do that. You can be a leader on a team, even with your peers. And I encourage you to try. You don't have to be, but you try. Remember, a rising tide lifts all boats, and you're in the boat. So if you improve or you help your team execute, your team will be more successful, and therefore you will be presented with more opportunities, and you will be more successful. And leading is really about serving those around you. Okay. So again, anybody can be a leader, any position. But what makes a good leader? How do you serve a team? Look for managers and be a manager, in my opinion, that does these things. Remove any blockers. Typically, these are like, I don't have the software license to do some stuff, or I need additional software tools, or I need, whatever, right? Like as a manager, as a leader, you want to remove all the blockers for your team. Like you want to make sure that they have nothing in their way of getting their job done. That's just the bottom line. Bring out the best in people around you, encourage them, give them the training they need, whatever it is. Help people do their jobs. Trust that they will do their job and help them do it. And then protect the team from negative influences. Sometimes you have business managers coming in with crazy ideas or crazy things they want you to do. A good manager will be like, let me handle that. I'll talk to them. And then they basically push back and they say, no, we don't have time and space to do this nonsense. So protect the team from negative influences, distractions, things like that. And then you got to be willing to remove members that do not carry their weight. This is a tough one. As a manager, I fired people. You have to be willing to fire people. And the best way, or the way that I could kind of come to terms with that, because these are other human beings, is to understand that they are detrimental to the team as a whole. And your job as a leader is to protect the team. Okay, look after the team. Because you don't want someone not carrying the weight where other teammates have to compensate for their lack. Okay. All right. So this kind of sums it up nicely. I love this quote. Your odds of success are proportional to the number of people who want you to succeed. This is a great quote. Barnesh Shaw, HubSpot CTO, co-founder. If you remember anything about relationships, this is the thing, right? So in other words, you want more people that want you to succeed. You'll get more references, you'll get more opportunities, you'll get more help. How do you do that? By being a good teammate, by being a good leader. In the trenches, you earn it, right? So that's what this is about. This is great. Okay, last thing, avoiding burnout and staying motivated. This is a WHO definition, whatever. These are stages of burnout. You start to kind of work harder and harder to compensate. You neglect yourself, you neglect your life, you withdraw, and then eventually you become depressed and burnout. I've been through this personally. It's very common in our industry. So there's a report, I'll tell you about my experience in a second. Yerbo, they surveyed a bunch of IT professionals. The main takeaway from this slide, it's a real problem in our industry. And companies need to be aware of this, frankly, because otherwise they'll burn out all of their staff. And this is not good. This is the opposite of sustainability, right? Okay. So this is my insight from being burned out myself. If you believe you might be burned out, you probably are burned out. If you think, oh, there may be a chance that I'm burned out, yeah, you probably are. Okay. Okay, so self-care matters. There's another graphic, what I thought would make me productive: hard work, working all the time, 24/7, burning midnight oil, cramming before tests. You all know what that is. What actually makes me productive: exercise, eating healthy, sleep. 3 main things. They sound boring, but they're actually really, really important. And I know you hate to hear it, but it's true. I struggle with this. I don't sleep very well. I want to eat California burritos all the time. And I'm lazy. But also, time off. It's good to take a break. Okay, so I can't tell you how many times I'm like working on this problem, I'm going crazy, whatever. And then I go for a hike. And while I'm hiking, like mile 2, I'm like, oh, I know how to solve that problem. Like, I know how to solve it. More times I can tell you. And why? Because the subconscious mind actually works on problems. At least mine does. And you may find similar experiences. So take time off. Sometimes, like hitting it, constantly is not the best way to do it. Okay, work-life balance. We talked about this a little bit. Everybody has this idea of work-life balance. I actually don't really like that phrase because I don't think it's accurate. This kind of shows that it's kind of messy, right? Like you don't have like really work-life balance. I prefer to actually view it as tides ebb and flow. Okay, so just as coursework kind of ramps up in the midterms and ramps up towards the end of the semester, like with tests and papers and projects, life is that way, right? Like work is that way. You have deadlines. You have things you want to ship, you have business goals you want to try to achieve. But the other reality is that, I was working at a startup and we were the natural language startup actually. And we were trying to sell the company and we're like, shoring up all sorts of deficiencies to try to pitch, ask Jeeves to buy us, which is hilarious. I don't know if you don't know that. Anyway, and I could tell you that for all that number of hours that we worked beforehand to try to pitch the company, after the pitch, we goofed off just as many hours after that. And so, again, karma's real. I don't think that the myth of the balance is kind of not totally accurate, at least in my experience. Things ebb and flow. Okay, so this is like kind of like your old school hardcore advice. If you just show up on time, do what you say you're going to do, care about what you're doing. You already had 99% of people. I actually believe this is true, to be honest. This is a little bit harder than what it implies here. This is really about integrity. And caring has a lot of other things that fall out of it. But I do think if you do this, you'll be fine. So just trust that if you're doing these things, you're enough, right? Like you're doing enough for the company, you're doing enough for the. Okay, bottom line with self-care. If your job isn't improving your quality of life, it's time to get another job. That's it. Because chances are your first job won't be your last job. Your second job will probably not be your last job. If you transition jobs every X number of years, I tend to do 4 years plus or minus 2 in my 10 years of time, which means I've had whatever 8 jobs over the course of my career. It's okay. It's okay. Find a new job. Improve your quality of life. It's okay to be selfish here. Self-care is not selfish. Okay, motivation. I read this book when I was having a lot of trouble being motivated. Again, this is like, I don't know if I was so burned out, but I was just like kind of disillusioned with what I was doing. Daniel Pink's Drive is a great book. He talks about motivation, and he talks about how there's 3 aspects to motivation. Purpose, like you have to believe, you have to have something that you care about. Like what you're working on matters. It's important. Let's go this way. Mastery. These are your skills. Your skills are developing. You're learning new things. You're growing. Whatever you're dedicating yourself to. And autonomy. You have some ability to control like what you do and how you do it. Right? A sense of control, a sense of agency. Right? And when you have these 3 things in a job or career, like you have motivation. What I was missing was purpose in one of the jobs. I didn't really care about it. And so then my motivation drops. So this is kind of like a framework to understand what motivates you, what not. And so how do you stay motivated? This lends itself to this concept of ikigai. How many of you have heard of ikigai? Okay. I'm Japanese, so this is a half Japanese. This is a Japanese concept that means reason for being. There's 4 aspects of this. What you're good at. Okay, so this is like your technical skills, like what you're proficient at, what you're learning here at school, like technical excellence, gotta be good. What you love. This is why I encourage you to look at domains that actually interest you, to work in domains that you actually care about. What the world needs, like actually has to be a problem or something that I think the world needs. I'm not gonna bag on social media, but the world doesn't need another social media network. Sorry, it doesn't. At least in my opinion. You may disagree. And what do you get paid for? Okay. So all these things come together and you have ikigai, the reason for being. So this is the goal. Like to me, this is like what I try to achieve whenever I try to select a job and navigate my career. I'm looking for that. Right? I'm looking for that intersection. And sometimes be willing to, make compromises in some areas for other areas. Anyway, so there's a concept. You can take away. Sometimes my life looks like this. Anyway, so it's okay. It's my, Anyway, I like this quote a lot. Self-care is giving the world the best of you instead of what's left of you. And so I think that's super important to remember, because when I was burned out, like I wasn't really good for my company. Like I wasn't really producing anything for my company and everything else. And so it's super important to remember this. Okay, so those are the three aspects of creating a sustainable career. And time to start is now for you. You may think that, okay, you're still in school or what have you, but I think that you can cultivate these skills going forward. So I would challenge you to do one thing in each of these areas. So this area is how do you navigate a changing technical landscape? Identify a technology, technique, domain that you're curious about, and then spend a few hours building something fun. Just do it. Do some whatever, build a data pipeline, explore a tool, have some fun. It could be part of your classwork or not. Drive your professors crazy, whatever. Okay, cultivating authentic relationships. Have a conversation with someone in their area of expertise or knowledge, not necessarily yours. Someone, one of your friends at school who's studying something different, that you don't know anything about. Understand the fundamental challenges and problems in their chosen careers. Tell me about what you're learning. Tell me about what you're interested in. What do you think you're going to do after college or school? Avoiding burnout and staying motivated. Write a few thoughts about your ikigai. Write them out. What do you love? What does the world need? What are you good at? What can you pay for? Go outside, live life. Because again, the primary value that you can offer the world, companies in the world, in the industry, is applying your skills and technology to those problems. So the more you can relate, the more you get in touch with life, more value you can bring. Thanks. Appreciate it. Any questions, comments?